Hi and welcome back to another video of jPlay. I am Marcus and today I will walk you through some actual rounds of Pixie Queen that's currently on Kickstarter. In Pixie Queen, 2 to 5 players try to please their queen as pixies. And yeah, that's the Pixie Queen apparently. What's really, let's say, kind of unique in this game is that players can only earn penalty points throughout this game. So whenever you gain a point, as long as the game is still ongoing, it's a penalty point. At the end of the game, there is a way that you really get some actual victory points, which pretty much brings you out of the minus points down here. These are little whip symbols here, which I really like a lot. But throughout the game, you can only earn penalty points and you will lose points or you will gain penalty points a lot in this game. So it's not really unlikely that a player ends the game with minus 39 points or something like that. On top of this, there is also a chance that your little scoring marker makes it to 60 or more penalty points, in which case you enter the so-called oblivion pit and then you are out of the game. Yeah, there is some actual player elimination in this one, but really fear not. This only happens in very, very extreme situations. You really have to play very poorly. Other players might also hit you with some of the actions. Only in this case it's likely that this is going to happen. I played it quite some times now and it never happened to us. The game can end in one of two ways. The easiest way is just to play 7 rounds, and at the end of round 7 you do some final scoring, and whoever has the least amount of penalty points or even made it to some positive victory points, then this player would apparently be the winner. The second way how this game can end is when 15 of those golden bonus tiles have been claimed by the players. There are also 2 silver ones in each of those tracks here, but again, only the golden one counts. So if those 5 are gone, those 5 are gone, and those 5 are gone, this would also trigger the end of the round. You play until the end of the round and then you do the final scoring, and those tiles are pretty much the main way for you to gain some actual victory points. But again, those victory points are not scored until the end of the game. When you get such a tile, you put it behind your player screen and then you would score them by the end of the game. And now for the usual disclaimer for a Kickstarter preview video. Everything you see here is a prototype. Some of the components look pretty finished already, like those player screens here, but they may or may not show the final product. Of course, the game is pretty much set. I determined the starting player order at random, or basically like the colors are arranged on my table here, but for this preview it doesn't really matter. So gray would go first, and blue, yellow and green. And as part of setup, the last player gets to choose one of those permanent bonus abilities first, and there are 2 that are really extremely good. This one here gives you 1 piece of silver at the start of each round. This is really huge. And this one here also is pretty useful because it reduces the amount of penalty points you gain by the end of each round by 1. This is also great. I think both of them are extremely cool, and I think green player will go for this one here, because again, you lose a lot of victory points by the end of each round, and when you have a way to reduce them, you should go for it. So let's grab this tile, and this goes to the appropriate spot in front of the player screen, so the other players know what he has, but the other players do normally not know what resources the player have, though they only know the tiles he has and how many action discs are still available. Even though this guy grabbed this tile, there is a way for the other players later through an action to exchange those tiles. And this is also something that's, let's say, relatively unique for this game. It can be pretty mean. For example, there is this one action here that allows you to distribute penalty points amongst your players. And some of you might not like this, and when I read the rules for the first time, I was also concerned, wow, Eurogame with so many take that, punishing other players, does it work? And I think this game does this balance act pretty well, to be honest. So fear not, it's really all balanced. It's not happening too often that you're punishing other players, but at some points throughout the game it will certainly happen. Next is yellow, and he will most likely or pretty certainly go for this thing here. So this gives him 1 piece of silver at the start of each round. Also very, very powerful. And then it's already pretty disappointing. Those are cool abilities, but they are not the best starting abilities that are out there. And I think blue will go for this one here because it reduces the amount of silver you need in order to exchange it to gold by 1. This can be pretty handy, of course. And I think gray player will go... tough one. Maybe if he would go for gold or go for this one. No, let's focus on gold, and I think he will go for this special tile here. And you can always ever have 1 tile of each type. So I could not go for a second permanent ability tile. That's not allowed. I can only exchange it with a special action. I can also not discard it. So as long as I have it, I have it. I really have to take this action here, which then allows me to exchange one of my tiles, and there it really doesn't matter which tile it is, with either another tile that's on the board. It has to be the same type though of tile, so I cannot exchange one of those permanent ability tiles with one of those one-time usage tiles. But again, I can exchange this tile either from the board or with another player, and of course the other player cannot do anything about it. Even though the starting player already has a relatively big disadvantage in respect to those permanent ability tiles, he gets an additional disadvantage. So he starts the game with 2 fewer resources, and those 2 resources are honey. So each of the players as of player 2, 3 and 4 starts the game with 2 honey, 2 bread, 2 apples, 2 silver and 2 gold. It's pretty much the same for the starting player, but again, he's lacking those 2 honey resources. And that's mainly because you need honey in order to change the starting player. But I think I will come to that when I explain some of those actions. By the way, the game ships with more than just those 6 permanent ability tiles, but you always remove, I think, 4 of them at the start of each game. So there is definitely some variety in which special abilities that are available throughout the game. So I think without further ado, let's get started. I will explain you all the rules as I go, as usual. And the first thing you would always do in a given round would enter the so-called stealing phase. Normally there is nothing to steal in round 1, but as one of the players started the game with this permanent ability tile, this means in this phase, also during round 1, he's allowed to grab 1 piece of silver, which is definitely quite a lot. You directly put them back behind your player screen, because none of the other players should really know what you have. After the stealing phase, we will see the action phase, and this is basically the main part of the game, and I think we can directly dive into this action phase with the gray player being the starting player, and this is when those action discs come into the picture. Each of the players has 4 of those, and there is no way to gain more of them. And what can you do with those? You place them on those action spaces. There are actions that require 2 discs or 1 disc and 1 pixie, but this is something that will only happen, let's say, throughout the game. At the start of the game there aren't any pixies really on the board. Right now all those pixies are here down in each of the players' minds, so there are slaves pretty much. And here you also see the second action spot being only a 1 disc action spot. So in this case it's sufficient to place 1 of your discs on this space, and this allows you, and only the yellow player in this case, to do the mining action, for example. There are different other actions on the game board that are also 1 disc action, so like this copy action here, for example, or like this action here, which is some kind of a desperate action or something you would normally only do by the end of the game. But most of the main actions you do throughout the game are 2 disc actions like here. And I think gray wants to go in big, so he will place his 2 stones here. So this space is now pretty much occupied, and this allows him to grab this one-time tile here, which he just places in front of his player screen. So he can basically use it once and then it will be returned to the game board, but he can pretty much decide when he wants to use it. This special tile allows you to provide a double offering when it comes to the later offering phase, which can be pretty powerful, but he doesn't need to do that at the end of this round. He could also wait until the end of the next round. But keep in mind, another player might go for this tile by first claiming another one-time usage tile and then maybe exchange it or something like that. Something that's not happening that often, to be honest. Then it's blue, and I think blue wants to progress on the silver mine track. So he will place 2 of his action stones here, and then he can either pay 1 piece of gold or 1 piece of silver to move on the appropriate track. In this case, I think he will spend 1 piece of silver, and this allows him to move his disc 1 step here on the silver mine track. For once, the silver mine track shows you how much silver you need in order to trade it for gold. So here he just moved from 4 stones to only 3 silver, which is quite a lot. And because he also has this tile here, which also reduces the amount by 1. This would mean for him it's only 2 pieces of silver he needs to spend for 1 piece of gold. That's only one thing. The second thing that's also pretty important is you see those whips that are printed here. And at the end of each round there is a penalty phase, which pretty much scores you a lot of penalty points. And you check those 2 tracks and see what or how many whips are printed in between, and then for each of the tracks you score that many penalty points. Right now that's still a 3, so only the next step will reduce the amount of penalty points he's get, but he has to start somewhere. I think yellow will go for this tile here, so this is also a 1-use tile, and this allows the yellow player when he does a mining action at a later point in time to choose the first 2 stones he's drawing out of this cloth bag here. In this bag there is gold, there is silver, and there are stones, and yeah, in most cases you really want to see some gold, and this really means the first 2 stones he's drawing from this bag could be gold. So let's grab this tile and put it on the appropriate space on his player screen. And last but not least, it's green, and I think green will go here and grab this food tile here. And this food tile gives you 2 pieces of food at the start of each round during the so-called stealing phase. So this is definitely also a very valuable thing to have. And keep in mind the next tile will be 3. I think the next tile is also a 3, and then the last 2 tiles would provide you 4 of those food tiles. But keep in mind you can exchange them at a later point in time. Then it's the gray player again, and I think he wants to have some honey. So he places his 2 stones here, and this gives him either 2 apples, 2 honey, or 2 bread. In this case he takes 2 honey because he started the game without any, and the green might demand some honey at the end of the round. So I think for him that's pretty important. So let's grab it and put it behind his player screen. I think blue wants to do some mining, so he places 1 of his stones here on his mine, and for each pixie you still have in the mines you gain 1 stone out of the cloth bag, and yeah, whatever you get, you get. So let's see, these are 2, 1 silver, 1 stone. It's also useful, and wow, that's not too bad, to be honest. So he got 2 silver, 1 gold, and 1 stone. So those resources just go behind his player screen so he can use them. But this stone here is also a pretty take that mechanic, because it allows you to tie 1 of the pixies to a stone. You can only ever tie pixies that are in the bottom row to a stone, and each of those pixies can have at least 3 of those stones. Of course you start with the pixies of another player, and in this case I think I will go with the starting player. He also has this double offering tiles which he can pretty much use pretty well, so let's just go for this pixie here. So this pixie cannot move out of the mines easily. You first have to basically pay 1 piece of bread to remove 1 stone, but of course you can always go for the second pixie on the left side, and you always start from the bottom, of course, but another player might also put a stone to this pixie here. In this case, gray player cannot move at all unless he spends 1 piece of bread, and you can do that basically anytime throughout the game. Then it's yellow, and I think he wants to promote 1 of his pixies. So he will place 2 of his action stones here. And this allows him to promote 1 of his pixies that are either in the mine or somewhere else on the game board up 1 level. So right now all of his pixies are in the mine, so the only thing he can promote them to is the first level of this, I don't know, beehive or something like that. At least it reminds me of something similar. And you can always only go to a space where you still see the hand. So those 2 are currently locked, so he cannot promote his pixies there. You can definitely, let's say, swap positions with another player. That's something you can do. It costs you a piece of apple, but right now that's not necessary. So I think I will just take this pixie here and we'll put it on this space here. So I promoted this pixie to this space. For once I get this pixie closer to be a loyal servant, which then later on provides me a lot of victory points, but I come to that later on. And it also provides me 1 piece of apple at the start of each round during the steal phase, because there's an apple printed to it. The higher you get with your pixies, the more resources you get. So this is definitely a great way to gain some more resources. Green will go to the copy action here. Again, you can only do that once per round. So let's place this guy here. And the first player to go there gets 1 penalty point. Second and third gets 2 penalty points. And the fourth or the fifth player get 3 penalty points in order to copy an action. So in this case, that's pretty okay. Let's just move the green player 1 step into the penalty points, and then he is allowed to copy an action that's for 1 taken. So with this action you cannot go for this or this action, for example, because they have not been taken already, and you also have to take a 2 spaces action pretty much. And I think in this case he also wants to move ahead on the gold track in this case, so he pays 1 piece of gold, which allows him to move his little disc up this gold track here. Again, also something in order to reduce penalty points throughout the game. Right now it's still a 3, but this value also shows how much gold you have to spend, in this case 3 gold, in order to get 1 of those ring bonus tiles here. So for 3 pieces of gold you take the leftmost bonus tile here, and this really provides you a lot of those victory points by the end of the game. Then it's gray. Gray is out of action disc, so he has to pass with his last action disc. Blue will also go for the copy action. Now he's the second player, so he will get 2 penalty points for this. And with this action, he will copy this action down there. So this gives him this food tile here, so 3 pieces of food at the start of each round, which is definitely not too bad. Yellow is out of action discs, so I think green will change the turn order track, and for each piece of honey you get, you basically move your little stone 1 step ahead. And I think, why not? I think he pays 2 of those, so that's 1 and 2. It does not change the turn order for this round because this is still this one. This will be then adjusted at the start of the next round, but this definitely preps him for the next round, which isn't that bad. Now all of the players are out of action discs, so we come into the actual offering phase. So now the queen will tell us what she wants from us. So this can be bread, honey, or apple, and in this round this is bread. And now we have a bidding mechanism in place, which is really interesting in this one, because all players can now exactly hold out one hand with one resource. This resource can either be the resource that's on demand, in this case bread, or it can be gold or silver, which is really interesting. If you don't have either of those resources, you can or have to pretty much show an empty hand, and when you open it, the queen is so damn disappointed with you that you will immediately lose 5 or gain 5 penalty points, which is really something you want to avoid, and pretty much one of the very rare occasions in which you really could make it to the oblivion pit and be out of the game. As Gray has this double offering tile he collected, he can now go for 2 resources. So he can go for gold and silver, for example, but he can also go for bread and silver or bread and gold, but of course never the wrong resource. And I think he will definitely go for it. So he will give this tile back to the game board, so he will then show 2 resources, and as I play alone I will run out of hands pretty soon, so I decided to go with those little cups here. And keep in mind, the gray player is allowed to have 2 different resources under this cup. Normally we really show 2 hands, but in this case let's go with this cup. The other players have also made up their mind, and at the same time all of the players will reveal their hands. So let's see what Gray has. Wow, Gray went in big. 2 gold and 2 silver, so he really wants to progress on this gold and silver tracks here. Blue has 2 pieces of silver, which is still good enough to progress on the silver track, and yellow and green, they both offered bread as expected by the queen. Now the first thing is you check that at least one of the players offered what the queen demanded. If all of the players went for gold or for silver, the queen would really be upset, and we would skip the entire reward phase. All of the bidden resources go back to the supply, and this is pretty much the end of the round. There is still one additional thing you normally do. You have to send one of your pixies back to the mine, but at this point in time that's not necessary, as at least one of the players bid one of those bread tokens. Now let's check the gold and silver track. You check for majorities. Let's go with the gold track first. Only gray player offered gold, in which cases he definitely gets 1 step on the golden track, but because he was the player who offers the most gold, even though he was alone, it's still the most gold, he gets an additional step on this track. But of course it was pretty costly, because though 2 pieces of gold is definitely quite something, and not sure if I would normally do that, but yeah, I want to show how this game works. For once he gets 1 whip less throughout this, or at the end of this round, which is definitely something. And yeah, trading in gold versus rings is also much cheaper than when he was on this track here. Let's check out the silver track. Both the gray and the blue player offered 2 pieces of silver. The queen accepts that, that's fine, you don't get punished. But as none of the players offered the most, they only get 1 step each. For blue, that's good news, because he also landed on this space, so he gets 1 whip less, or 1 penalty point less at the end of this round. And for gray, it's also okay, because the exchange rate for silver to gold also decreased by 1. Now for the food rewards. For each matching resource you offered, you are allowed to promote 1 pixie, 1 space. Of course, you can also use 2 of these bread to promote 1 pixie, 2 spaces, but it's pretty much one-on-one, and you decide on how you want to promote them. One thing I forgot to do, all those action stones go back to the players, because this will open up those positions again. So now those spaces can be taken by the pixies when you promote them. The same is true for all the other stones. I can move them off in a second, and you decide who goes first on this promotion by this favorite track here. Not the starting player track, but the favorite track. But keep in mind, this track will be adjusted according to the starting order at the start of the next round. In this case, only yellow and green offer it, so yellow would go first in this case. And I think yellow would spend both of her bread cubes in order to promote this pixie 2 steps. So first bread goes here. She can also go on any other space as long as this new space is 1 step on top of her current position. So she cannot promote to the left or to the right, or also not downwards. That's not allowed. You also have to go 1 step up. And I think with this next promotion, in this case it really doesn't matter, and I think it's only, let's say, it's a difference on, let's say, which position you want to end on later on because of your goods you get by the start of the round. And for the next step it really doesn't matter that much in respect to resources, so I think she will go onto this space. Then it's green. Green also offered 2 bread, and I think he will promote this pixie onto this space. This gives him 1 piece of bread at the start of the next round, and I think with the next pixie he will go here. He could also move this pixie again, but I think he wants to have more pixies out on the board for now. So those go back to the reserve, and this was pretty much already the reward phase. Now we jump right into the penalty phase. Dum dum dum. So all the players will now score penalty points, that's for sure. And the first thing you always check is how many slaves are in a player's mind. For 1 slave that's left, you only gain 1 whip or 1 penalty points. For 2 or more slaves, you get 2 penalty points. Right now, all the players have at least 2 of those slaves in the mind, so all of the players will get 2 penalty points. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Why didn't I move the green token? That's pretty easy, because he has this permanent ability tile which reduces the maximum penalty points you get down to only 1. So you will always get 1, that's for sure, but at least you don't get hit right away with 2 of those penalty points, and this means he only loses or gets 1 penalty point. Not that fast, we still have 2 more things to check, and these are those golden and silver mine tracks. So in this case, blue gains 5 penalty points. The same is true for gray, and green and yellow both get 6 additional victory points, which is really quite a lot, of course, and can really make a difference. So that was 5 for blue, so he's going down to 9. It's also 5 for gray, going down to 7. And green and yellow both get 6, so they go down to 8 penalty points. Whenever a player crosses one of those symbols here, she or he has to send one of her active pixies right back into the mine. There is a tile out there, which is this mercy tile here, and you can basically spend this tile in order to avoid this effect 1 time. And the green's favorite also is more or less secure by this effect. So whoever has the biggest stone on ahead of all the other players is also safe from this particular penalty. And this pretty much ends the round. All the discs have been removed to their players. Let's start the next round by adjusting the favorite track accordingly, so according to the player order track. Then the pixies will go stealing. This is definitely a cool thing. So this pixie gets 1 apple, 1 bread and 1 honey. Of course, this goes right behind the respective player screen. The same is true for those 2 pixies here. So here he gets a bread, here he gets a honey, also going back right behind the player screen of the green player. And whoever has those food tiles can also choose the amount of food that's printed on this food tile. In this case, that's 2, and you can go for any combination of food tiles. And I think green will go for a bread and another piece of honey. Also put it back behind his player screen. And of course, we must not forget this silver tile here. Yeah, and this goes on until either 7 rounds are played or all of those bonus tiles have been grabbed, all of those golden bonus tiles have been grabbed. And yeah, whoever has the least amount of penalty points by the end of the game is the winner. There are some additional factors that you have to consider at the end of the game. So you do the final scoring, so all penalty points that you acquired so far remain. You get bonus points for the reward tokens you accumulated throughout the game. So for example, if you got one of those golden rings here, for example, you would gain 10 points on top of this. Then this is something that's really important. You get 3 penalty points for a majority of each resource type. So there are 5 different resources in this game, and for each of the types to check who has the most resources left by the end of the game. And this player gains 3 penalty points. So you really want to make sure to get rid of your resources by the end of the game. And then you get also an additional penalty point for each stone that's still on a player's slave pretty much, but you can more or less get rid of those stones anytime throughout the game as long as you spend some of those bread tokens. And yeah, this is pretty much how you play Pixie Queen. I think I will do one more video, but maybe for the majority of you got enough information how this game actually feels. In the next video I will really try to gain 1 or 2 of those reward tiles up there, maybe show you 2 or 3 more of the actions. But I really hope this first video already showed you how this game can actually feel like. And yeah, don't forget to check out the campaign on Kickstarter. I will definitely put a link into the description of this video. So check it out yourself. There are some stretch goals waiting for you. I believe in the meantime the campaign is already fully funded, which is definitely good news. So it's already on to the next stretch goals. I think the campaign is still going for at least 3 to 4 weeks or so. You still have enough time to back it. I really like this game a lot, even though I was really concerned when reading the rules. How do they really want to play that? Do I want to play this with my wife, with friends, with all this take that and putting slaves into the mines? Sounded all pretty mean, but all those factors really are not that mean as they seem to be when you first read about them. There are really some very mean things to do. So for example, you can steal from another player, you can again send him back to the mines or whip him out, steal his bonus tiles and whatnot. But it's all relatively balanced throughout the game because those actions are not, let's say, not that numerous throughout the game. So the majority of the time you will really focus on your own advantage, and only when you really see a particular fit or really opportunity, only then you will normally go for the other players. I really hope you enjoyed my little walkthrough so far. Again, keep in mind I will definitely post another episode showing you some more of the mechanics of this game. And yeah, hope to see you soon in one of my next videos. And until then, bye bye.